The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber slid open with a deep rumble that echoed through the vast hall. Admiral Jinho Park walked forward with steady steps, his black uniform crisp and clean despite the long journey from Earth. Behind him, Captain Minji Lee carried a small case filled with documents and data chips. Their footsteps clicked against the polished floor as thousands of alien eyes turned to watch them. The chamber was enormous, bigger than any building Jinho had ever seen on Earth. The ceiling stretched up so high that it disappeared into shadows. Seats arranged in circles rose up like a giant bowl filled with creatures from across the galaxy. Some looked almost human, while others were so strange that Jinho had to focus to keep his face calm. At the center of the room sat the Council's most powerful members. The hegemony delegation occupied the largest section, their reptilian forms, draped in dark robes that seemed to absorb light. Their leader, Council Member Vextar, was bigger than the others. His scales were deep green, almost black, and his yellow eyes watched the humans with obvious disgust. Jinho had been in many difficult meetings during his 30 years in Earth's space navy, but nothing quite like this. The air felt thick and heavy, not just from the different atmospheric mixtures needed by various species, but from the tension that filled the room. He could smell strange scents, some sweet, some sharp, some that made his nose wrinkle. "State your business, humans." Vextar's voice boomed across the chamber. His words came out as a low hiss, translated by the universal communicators everyone wore. "You have been called here to answer for your crimes?" Jinho stepped forward and bowed slightly, following the diplomatic protocols he had studied. "Honored. Council members, I am Admiral Jinho Park, representing Earth and her colonies. We come seeking peaceful discussion about the territorial disputes in the Outer Rim sectors." A low rumble of whispers filled the chamber. Some species seemed curious about the humans, while others looked annoyed or bored. The hegemony delegation remained silent, their cold eyes fixed on the two humans standing in the center of the vast room. Vextar leaned forward in his seat, his long neck stretching down like a snake preparing to strike. "Peaceful discussion? Your species has already committed acts of war against the hegemony. You dare to mine in our sacred territories without permission." Captain Minji stepped forward and opened her case. She pulled out a data chip and held it up so the Council could see. "Honored Council, our surveys show that the Kepler 442 and Gliese 6867 systems were unclaimed when our mining ships arrived. We followed all the procedures set down in the Galactic Mining Treaty of 2387. Our legal department checked every law and regulation." The data chip projected a holographic map above their heads. It showed the disputed star systems, with dates and legal codes floating next to each one. The evidence was clear. By galactic law, the systems belonged to whoever claimed them first, and Earth's records showed they had filed the proper claims months before any hegemony ships had arrived. But Vextar dismissed the evidence with a wave of his clawed hand. "Laws made by weaker species mean nothing to the hegemony. We have ruled this sector of space for 10,000 years. Those worlds are ours by right of conquest, not by the scribbling of lesser beings." Other council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The hegemony was known throughout the galaxy for their military might, but few species liked their attitude of superiority. Still, none dared to speak against them openly. The hegemony's war fleets were legendary, and they had destroyed entire civilizations that opposed them. Admiral Jinho felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his voice calm and professional. "Council Member Vextar, humanity has great respect for the hegemony's long history. However, we cannot abandon legally claimed territory without proper compensation or alternative arrangements. Perhaps we can work out a trade agreement that benefits both our peoples." Vextar's laugh was cold and cruel, like ice cracking in winter. It echoed through the chamber, making several smaller species flinch. "Trade? With humans? Your species crawled out of the mud barely 200 years. Ago, you know nothing of space, nothing of power, nothing of your place in this galaxy. He stood up slowly, his full height impressive even among the other large species in the council. His robes fell around him like shadows, and his yellow eyes seemed to glow with inner fire. I will make this simple for your primitive minds to understand. You have 7 days to remove all human presence from those systems. All mining equipment, all ships, all personnel, everything. The chamber fell completely silent. Even the constant hum of the air recycling systems seemed to quiet down. This was not just a territorial dispute anymore. This was a direct threat, delivered in front of the entire Galactic Council. And if we refuse? Jinho asked quietly. Vextar's smile showed rows of sharp teeth. Then the hegemony will demonstrate why we have been the dominant power in this sector for millennia. Your pathetic fleet will burn like paper in a fire. Your colonies will be reduced to glass and ash. And your home world. He paused, savoring the moment. Your precious Earth will serve as a warning to any other upstart species that thinks they can defy us. Captain Minji's hand moved slightly toward her sidearm, but Jinho gave her a tiny shake of his head. Starting a fight here would accomplish nothing except getting them both killed and giving the hegemony an excuse to attack immediately. You speak of destroying entire worlds, Jinho said, his voice carrying across the silent chamber. Billions of innocent people. Surely the Council cannot approve of such extreme measures over a simple territorial dispute. Some of the other council members looked uncomfortable, but none spoke up. The hegemony's military reputation was too frightening, their retaliation too swift and brutal for anyone to risk opposing them. Vexatar spread his arms wide, as if embracing the fear that filled the room. The council knows that peace requires strength. The hegemony maintains order in this galaxy. When lesser species learn their place, there is harmony. When they resist, he let the threat hang in the air. Commander Hyun Kim, Admiral Park's aide, stood quietly in the observer section. His recording devices captured every word, every gesture, every threat. This information would be crucial for what was to come. 7 days, Vexatar repeated, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Remove yourselves from our territory or face extinction. Choose wisely, humans. We have ended 17 civilizations that made the wrong choice. You would be merely number 18. The council session erupted into chaos as various species began talking at once. Some called for more discussion, others demanded immediate action. But through it all, Vextar remained standing, his cold eyes fixed on the two humans who had dared to challenge the might of the hegemony. Admiral Jinho Park looked up at the towering reptilian form and spoke words that would echo through galactic history. Council Member Vextar, humanity respectfully declines your ultimatum. We will not abandon our legal claims, and we will defend our people from any aggression. The chamber fell silent again. In the space of a few words, war had been declared. The emergency meeting room deep under Earth's capital was filled with tension. Admiral Jinho Park stood at the head of the long metal table, his hands pressed flat against its surface. Around him sat the most powerful people in human space. Generals, ministers, and intelligence officers who rarely appeared in public. The holographic display above the table showed Vextar's threats playing over and over. His cold reptilian voice filled the room each time, promising death and destruction to humanity. Some of the people watching looked scared. Others looked angry. But all of them understood that everything had changed. Tell us about their fleet, Defense Minister Wanho Kang said quietly. His weathered face showed no emotion, but his hands gripped his coffee cup tightly enough to make his knuckles white. Intelligence Director Salman Choi stood up and waved her hand. The hologram changed to show hundreds of dark shapes moving through space, like a swarm of deadly insects. The Hegemony battle fleet has 823 capital ships. Each one is bigger than our largest carrier. Their weapons can crack a planet's crust from orbit. She pointed to the largest ship in the display. Their dreadnoughts carry enough firepower to destroy entire space stations with a single shot. They've used these ships to conquer 17 different species over the past 1,000 years. No one has ever defeated them in open battle. General Narration, head of strategic operations, laughed bitterly. So we're supposed to fight that with our 300 patrol ships and mining vessels? The Hegemony will wipe us out in hours. Our public fleet, yes, Admiral Park said calmly, but that's not all we have. The room fell silent. Several people leaned forward, confused by his words. Earth's space fleet was well known. Every ship was registered and tracked by both human and alien intelligence services. There were no secrets about humanity's military strength, or so everyone thought. Admiral Park nodded to Commander Hyun Kim, who stood near the door. "Show them Operation Sleeping Tiger." Commander Kim pressed several buttons on his data pad. The lights in the room dimmed and new shapes appeared in the holographic display. These ships looked nothing like the clean, bright vessels of humanity's public fleet. They were dark, angular, and seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Their surfaces were covered in strange patterns that hurt to look at directly. "What am I looking at?" whispered Trade Minister Jiho Bei. He rubbed his eyes, trying to focus on the strange ships that seemed to shift and blur even as he watched them. "The Ghost Fleet," Admiral Park said simply. 40 years of secret development. While the galaxy watched our merchant ships and patrol vessels, we built our real military and hidden shipyards on the far side of the moon. Engineer Dayun Han stepped forward with a data tablet in her hands. She was young for such an important position, but her reputation for advanced technology was known throughout human space. Each ghost ship uses quantum displacement drives that let them move through folded space. They can appear and disappear without warning. She touched her tablet, and one of the strange ships in the display seemed to fade away completely. Then, it reappeared on the other side of the hologram, as if it had never moved at all. "But that's not the best part," Dayun continued with a small smile. "Their hulls are made from adaptive materials that bend light and energy around them. When they don't want to be seen, they become completely invisible to every type of scanner we know about." Defense Minister Kang leaned back in his chair, looking stunned. "How many ships are we talking about?" 247 combat vessels, Commander Kim replied. "Destroyers, cruisers, and dreadnoughts, all equipped with weapon systems that exist in quantum superposition until the moment they fire. The enemy can't defend against attacks. They can't predict." General Yoon shook her head slowly. "This is impossible. How did you hide such a massive construction project for 40 years? The cost alone would be enormous." Admiral Park's expression grew serious. "Do you remember the mining guild's expansion into the asteroid belt 35 years ago? All those new facilities for processing raw materials? Half of them were actually shipyards. The guild has been working with us from the beginning." Intelligence Director Choi stood up again, her face pale. "The implications are staggering. If we've hidden this much from our own people, what else don't we know about human capabilities?" "Enough to make sure we survive," Admiral Park said firmly. "The Hegemony thinks they're facing a primitive species with primitive technology. They're about to learn how wrong they are." Captain Minji Lee, who had been quiet since returning from the council meeting, finally spoke up. "What about our colonies? 20 million people live in the disputed systems. We can't just abandon them." "We're not abandoning anyone," Admiral Park replied. "Operation Safe Harbor has already begun. Our people are being moved to underground shelters that were built for exactly this situation. When the Hegemony arrives, they'll find empty cities and abandoned mining stations." Commander Kim added more details. "Each shelter can support its population for months without outside help. They're hidden deep enough to survive orbital bombardment. The Hegemony will think they scared everyone away." "And then what?" asked Minister Kang. "We can't hide forever?" Admiral Park's smile was cold and hard. Then we show them what happens when someone threatens human children. The Ghost Fleet will teach the hegemony why humans have survived and thrived in a dangerous galaxy. Engineer Han activated another display showing weapon specifications. Our quantum torpedoes can phase through shields and armor before becoming solid inside the target. Our plasma cannons fire concentrated star matter that burns at 20 million degrees, and our displacement bombs can teleport parts of enemy ships into empty space. The room was completely quiet as everyone absorbed this information. For decades, humanity had seemed weak compared to the older galactic powers. They had accepted minor roles in galactic politics and avoided conflicts with stronger species. But all of that had been an act, a carefully maintained illusion while they prepared for this day. How long until the hegemony fleet arrives? General Yoon asked. 6 days, Commander Kim replied. They're moving fast, expecting easy victory. Admiral Park stood up and looked around the table at each person. Ladies and gentlemen, humanity has spent 40 years preparing for this moment. We've built ships that can strike from shadows. We've hidden our people where they can't be found. And we've developed weapons that can destroy enemies who think they're untouchable. He paused, letting his words sink in. The hegemony expects us to run or surrender. Instead, they're going to discover that humanity is not prey. We're predators who've been hiding our teeth. The meeting ended with quiet efficiency as each person left to carry out their assigned tasks. In 6 days, the most powerful military force in known space would arrive, expecting to find frightened humans begging for mercy. They would find something very different waiting for them in the dark. The hegemony war fleet moved through space like a dark storm cloud. 800 massive ships traveled together, their hulls gleaming under the light of distant stars. At the center of this armada, the flagship Dominator's fangs stretched nearly 2 kilometers from bow to stern. Its weapons could turn entire moons into dust. On the bridge of his mighty ship, Council Member Vex Tar stood before the main viewing screen with his clawed hands clasped behind his back. His yellow eyes burned with satisfaction as he watched. Human space grow larger ahead of them. Soon he would teach these upstart creatures their proper place in the galaxy. Status report, he commanded in his cold, hissing voice. Tactical Officer Krenax looked up from his scanner display. We are 6 hours from the first human colony, Lord Vextar. Our long-range sensors detect minimal fleet activity. A few dozen patrol ships fleeing toward the outer rim, just as predicted. Vexitar's mouth curved into a cruel smile that showed his sharp teeth. Of course they run. Fear is the natural response of prey animals when they sense a predator approaching. How pathetic. The bridge crew laughed at their commander's joke, but their laughter held no warmth. The hegemony had conquered so many species over the centuries that destroying humanity would be just another day's work. Their victims always followed the same pattern. First denial, then panic, then desperate flight. Shall we pursue the fleeing? Ships, Lord? Asked Navigation Officer Thekon. Let them run, Vextar replied with a dismissive wave. A few survivors will spread word of our power to other species. First, we destroy their colonies as promised. I want the humans to watch their worlds burn before we hunt down their pathetic fleet. The Armada continued its steady advance toward human territory. Vextar had planned this attack carefully. His ships would spread out across the disputed systems, overwhelming any defenses with sheer numbers. The humans would see the futility of resistance and surrender quickly. But something was wrong. The first sign came from Scout Ship Raptor's Claw, positioned at the edge of the fleet formation. One moment it was transmitting normal status reports, the next moment it was gone. Not destroyed, simply gone, as if it had never existed at all. Lord Vextar, Communications Officer Zetha called out, her voice confused. We've lost contact with Raptor's Claw. Their transponder signal just disappeared. Vextar frowned but remained calm. Probably a technical malfunction. These older ships have unreliable systems. Continue the advance. 20 minutes later, another ship vanished. then another. Each time, there was no explosion, no distress call, no debris field. The vessels simply stopped existing, leaving only empty space where they had been moments before. "This is impossible," muttered Tactical Officer Krenix as he stared at his scanner display. "Ships don't just disappear, there must be some kind of sensor error." But Vextar was beginning to feel the first cold touch of fear in his chest. In 1,000 years of conquest, the hegemony had never encountered anything like this. Their enemies always fought with visible fleets and predictable tactics. This was something else entirely. "All ships, combat alert," he commanded. "Activate full defensive screens and begin intensive scanning. Something is out there." The order spread through the armada, and hundreds of powerful scanners began sweeping space around them. Energy shields flickered to life around every ship, creating a protective barrier that could stop almost any known weapon, but the scanners found nothing, only empty void where their ships continued to vanish. Captain Jamin Seo watched the chaos from the bridge of his stealth destroyer, Shadow's Edge. The ghost ship hung in space like a piece of living darkness, completely invisible to the hegemony sensors. Around him, his crew worked with quiet efficiency, their faces calm despite the magnitude of what they were doing. "Target the next cruiser in their formation," he ordered softly. Lieutenant Yuri Shin nodded from her position at the weapons console. Her fingers danced over the controls with practiced skill, targeting systems that existed in quantum superposition. "Quantum torpedoes locked on target, Captain. Ready to fire." "Fire!" The torpedo phased through normal space-time, passing through the hegemony cruiser's shields as if they were made of air. Once inside the enemy ship's hull, it returned to normal matter and exploded with the force of a small star. The cruiser simply ceased to exist, its atoms scattered across light years of space. Throughout the hegemony fleet, panic was beginning to set in. Ship after ship vanished without warning, and their sensors could detect nothing. Some captains ordered their vessels to fire randomly into empty space, hoping to hit whatever was killing them. Their energy beams lit up the darkness like deadly fireworks but struck nothing. "Lord Vextar," called Communications Officer Zetha, her voice shaking with fear. "Captain Vorek is requesting permission to retreat. He says his ship is being stalked by invisible demons." Vextar's claws dug deep gouges in the metal railing before him. This was not how conquest was supposed to work. The hegemony won through overwhelming force and superior technology, not by fighting ghosts and shadows. "No retreat," he snarled. "We are the hegemony. We do not flee from primitive humans and their tricks. All ships concentrate fire on the human colonies. If we cannot find our attackers, we will force them to reveal themselves by threatening their people." The massive dreadnoughts turned their weapons toward the nearest human settlement. Energy cannons that could crack planets began charging with light that outshone nearby stars. But as they prepared to fire, something impossible happened. Space itself seemed to come alive around them. Quantum displacement drives activated throughout the area, folding space-time in ways that hurt to perceive. Ghost ships materialized from nowhere, their adaptive hulls rippling like water as they emerged from quantum stealth. They appeared above, below, and beside the hegemony vessels, so close that collision seemed inevitable. "Impossible," whispered Tactical Officer Krenix. "They were right next to us the entire time." Captain Jamin Seo smiled grimly as he watched the enemy fleet realize their situation. "All ghost ships, this is Shadow Actual. Execute Pattern Omega. Let's show them what humans do to those who threaten our children." The space around the hegemony armada erupted with weapons fire unlike anything seen before in galactic history. Quantum torpedoes phased through shields and armor. Plasma cannons fired concentrated star matter that burned through hull plating like acid. Displacement bombs teleported sections of enemy ships into empty space, leaving gaping holes where vital systems had been. The hegemony fleet, which had seemed so mighty and unstoppable, was being systematically torn apart by an enemy they couldn't see coming. Their own weapons fired wildly in all directions, but the ghost ships existed in quantum superposition, appearing and disappearing faster than conventional targeting systems could track. Vextar watched in horror as his proud armada died around him. These were not the primitive humans he had expected to crush. These were predators who had been hiding in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. "Get us out of here!" he screamed at his navigation officer. "Emergency jump to hyperspace! Now!" But it was too late. The Dominator's fangs shuddered as quantum torpedoes tore through its hull like paper. Systems exploded across the bridge as the flagship began its death spiral. Through the smoke and flames, Vextar caught a glimpse of a human ship materializing directly in front of them. It was beautiful and terrible, its dark hull seeming to absorb light itself. For just a moment, he could see the humans inside, calm and professional as they destroyed his dreams of conquest. Then everything went dark. The emergency council chamber on the hegemony homeworld had never seen such panic. General Threx paced back and forth across the polished stone floor, his heavy footsteps echoing in the vast room. Around the curved table sat the most powerful, leaders of their civilization. But today, they looked more like frightened children than mighty rulers. 800 ships, General Threx repeated for the 10th time, his voice filled with disbelief. "Our entire battle fleet, gone in 6 hours." Supreme Commander Nal Eth stared at the holographic display showing the last known positions of their armada. Red dots marked where each ship had disappeared, creating a pattern that made no sense to their military minds. The final transmission from Admiral Kexvar was disturbing. He claimed space itself was attacking them. High Counselor Vrenak looked up from the data reports scattered across the table before her. Her scaled hands shook as she held the pages. These sensor logs make no sense. Ships appearing from nowhere, weapons that pass through shields, enemies that exist and don't exist at the same time. "It's impossible," declared Science Minister Kothel. "No known technology can do what these reports describe. Matter cannot phase through energy barriers. Ships cannot appear from empty space. These humans must be using some kind of illusion or trick." But deep in her heart, High Counselor Vrenak knew it was no trick. She had lived through 7 centuries and seen many species rise and fall. Something told her that the hegemony had finally encountered a predator more dangerous than themselves. The chamber's communication system suddenly activated with a series of sharp beeps. All conversation stopped as the main screen flickered to life, showing the official seal of the Terran Federation. Then the image changed to show a middle-aged human man in a simple dark uniform standing behind a podium in what appeared to be a government building. "People of the galaxy," the human began, his voice calm and steady. "This is Premier Tai-Hyun Oh of the Terran Federation. I speak to you today with a heavy heart but a clear conscience." General Threx felt his blood turn to ice as he recognized the formal tone of a victory declaration. This was not the desperate plea of a defeated species. This was the voice of a conqueror announcing triumph. Hours ago, the hegemony sent a massive fleet to destroy our colonies and murder our people. They believed that humanity would cower before their might, as so many others have done throughout their long history of conquest. Premier O paused, letting his words sink in across the galaxy. They were wrong. The screen split to show footage from the battle, or what could be called a battle. The hegemony ships appeared massive and threatening, their weapons charging with deadly light. Then space around them came alive with invisible death. Ship after ship simply vanished as if they had never existed. "We did not seek this conflict," Premier O continued. "Humanity has always preferred peace to war, cooperation to conquest. But when someone threatens to destroy our homes and kill our children, they discover what we truly are." In the Hegemony Council chamber, several officials had begun to weep with fear. The footage showed their proud fleet being systematically destroyed by an enemy they could not even see. It was like watching gods of war casually swat aside insects. The human premier's image returned to fill the screen. Behind him stood other humans in military uniforms, their faces calm and professional. They did not look like primitive savages or desperate survivors. They looked like apex predators who had just finished hunting. "Let me be clear to every species watching this transmission," Premier O said, his voice growing harder. "Humanity will not be conquered, we will not be intimidated, and we will not allow genocidal threats to go unanswered. What happened to the hegemony fleet today was not cruelty, it was justice." Admiral Jin-Ho Park stepped forward to stand beside the Premier. His weathered face was serious as he addressed the camera. "To any species considering aggression against human worlds, understand this. What you witnessed today was accomplished by our patrol fleet, our smallest and oldest ships. Our actual military never left port." The silence in the Hegemony Council chamber was complete. If humanity's weakest ships could destroy their greatest fleet without taking damage, what could their real military do? The implications were terrifying beyond words. However, Premier O continued, his voice softening slightly, "Humanity bears no ill will toward the people of the hegemony or any other species. We seek only to live in peace and explore the wonders of this galaxy together. The actions we took today were defensive, not aggressive." Captain Minji Lee moved to the podium next. "We call upon the hegemony leadership to begin immediate peace negotiations. Humanity has no desire for conquest or revenge. We want only to ensure that no species will face the choice between submission and extinction." On the hegemony homeworld, Planetary Regent Kira Nam watched the broadcast from her office overlooking the capital city. As a human cultural advisor who had been working with the hegemony for years, she had tried to warn them that humanity was more dangerous than they appeared. No one had listened. Now she activated her personal communicator and sent a message to the Emergency Council. "Honored leaders, I formally request permission to serve as an intermediary for peace negotiations. As someone who understands both cultures, I may be able to help prevent further tragedy." Back in the council chamber, High Counselor Vren Ak read Regent Nam's message with obvious relief. "At least we have someone who can speak to them. But what can we offer? What do humans want from us?" The question hung in the air as Premier O's broadcast continued. "We understand that many species across the galaxy have suffered under hegemony rule. Entire civilizations have been destroyed or enslaved. This cannot continue." Defense Minister Wan-Ho Kang joined the other humans at the podium. "Effective immediately, humanity will guarantee the protection of any species threatened with extinction by the hegemony or any other aggressive power. The age of conquest through terror is over." General Threx collapsed into his chair, his massive frame shaking with defeat. In less than a day, the hegemony had gone from being the galaxy's dominant power to begging for mercy from a species they had dismissed as primitive. "What terms do you think they'll demand?" asked Science Minister Kothel quietly. High Counselor Vrenak looked at the screen where Premier O was concluding his address. "Given what they could demand, probably far less than we deserve. These humans seem to value restraint over revenge." Premier O's final words confirmed her hopes. "To the people of the hegemony worlds, humanity holds no hatred for you. Your leaders made a terrible mistake, but that does not make you our enemies. We hope that from this tragedy, we can build a better future for all species in this galaxy." The transmission ended, leaving the Hegemony Council in stunned silence. Outside their windows, they could see crowds gathering in the streets as news of their military defeat spread. Some were panicking, but others seemed almost relieved that their government's reign of terror might finally be ending. "Send word to Regent Nam," High Counselor Vrenok ordered quietly. "Tell her we accept humanity's offer to negotiate. and pray to whatever gods still listen that these humans are as merciful as they claim to be. In the depths of space, the Ghost Fleet continued its silent patrol, ready to strike again if anyone else decided to test humanity's resolve. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson about underestimating Earth's children. It would not soon be forgotten. 3 months had passed since the destruction of the Hegemony fleet, and the Galactic Council chambers looked very different. The seating arrangement had been completely changed. Where once the Hegemony delegation had occupied the largest and most prominent section, now humanity sat in the place of honor. Their simple dark uniforms stood out among the elaborate robes and ceremonial dress of the other species. Admiral Jinho Park, now promoted to Fleet Admiral, walked slowly to the center of the chamber. His steps were measured and confident, very different from the cautious approach he had taken during his last visit. Behind him walked Admiral Sun-Hee Lim, a stern woman whose reputation for tactical brilliance had spread throughout the galaxy since the battle. The chamber was packed with representatives from hundreds of species, all eager to hear what humanity would say. Some looked hopeful, others appeared nervous, but none showed the dismissive attitude that had been common before. Everyone had seen the footage of the Hegemony's mighty fleet simply vanishing into nothing. At the far edge of the chamber, in the EAI, smallest section reserved for defeated powers, sat what remained of the Hegemony leadership. Vextar was there, his once proud form now bent and scarred from his flagship's destruction. His yellow eyes, which had once burned with arrogance, now showed only fear and shame. The medical devices keeping him alive hummed quietly in the silence. Honored. Council! Fleet Admiral Park began, his voice carrying easily through the vast chamber. We gather today to discuss the formal peace agreement between humanity and the Hegemony and to address the new reality of galactic politics. High Counselor Vrenak, now the senior Hegemony representative, stood up slowly. Her once magnificent robes looked faded and worn, and her voice shook as she spoke. The Hegemony formally requests peace negotiations with the Terran Federation. We acknowledge our errors and wish to avoid further conflict. The change in tone was shocking to everyone present. The species that had dominated this sector of space for 10,000 years was now begging for mercy from the humans they had once threatened to exterminate. Captain Yunji Park, Fleet Admiral Park's daughter and the new head of diplomatic security, stepped forward with a data pad in her hands. Her youth surprised many of the alien delegates, but her calm confidence commanded respect. The Terran Federation has prepared terms for lasting peace. Our requirements are simple but non-negotiable. She activated her pad, and a holographic display appeared above the chamber showing star charts and legal documents. First, the Hegemony will immediately release all conquered species currently under their control. No species will be forced to remain part of the Hegemony against their will. Gasps echoed through the chamber as dozens of smaller delegations realized they would finally be free. Some representatives began to weep with joy, while others looked stunned by the sudden change in their fortunes. Second, Captain Park continued, the Hegemony will provide full reparations to all species they have harmed. This includes returning stolen resources, rebuilding destroyed worlds, and offering compensation for lives lost during their conquests. Vextar started to object, then seemed to remember his position and fell silent. The Hegemony no longer had the power to negotiate from strength. Third, the Hegemony military will be limited to defensive forces only. They will not be permitted to maintain offensive fleets or weapons of mass destruction. Humanity will monitor compliance with these restrictions. Trade Minister Jiho Bei joined Captain Park at the podium. However, we want to make something clear to the Hegemony people and all other species present. Humanity seeks no territory from the Hegemony. We want no tribute, no slaves, no conquered worlds. We simply want to ensure that the age of galactic conquest ends here and now. This declaration surprised everyone, including some of the human delegation. Throughout galactic history, Victorious species always demanded territory and resources from the defeated. Humanity's restraint seemed almost impossible to believe. Planetary Regent Kira Nam, the human advisor who had been working with the hegemony, stood up to address the council. I have lived among the hegemony for many years and seen both their cruelty and their capacity for change. The hegemony leadership has agreed to these terms not from fear alone, but from a genuine desire to reform their civilization. She gestured toward the reformed hegemony council, led by the moderate Regent Kess, who had replaced the more aggressive leaders. Under new leadership, the hegemony can become a force for stability rather than conquest. Humanity is willing to help with this transition. The chamber erupted into discussion as various species began to process what they were hearing. Freedom for conquered peoples, reparations for victims, and genuine reform rather than revenge. It was unlike anything seen in galactic politics for millennia. But Fleet Admiral Park wasn't finished. He raised his hand for silence, and the chamber immediately quieted. There is one more thing the Council needs to understand about humanity's position in this galaxy. He nodded to Admiral Lim, who activated another holographic display. This one showed shipping routes, trade agreements, and defensive pacts that humanity had been quietly negotiating over the past 3 months. 17 species have already signed mutual defense treaties with the Terran Federation, Admiral Lim announced. Any aggressive action against these species will be considered an attack on humanity itself. The implications hit the chamber like a shockwave. Humanity wasn't just ending the hegemony's reign of terror, they were building a new kind of galactic order based on protection rather than domination. Ambassador Chen Wuxin of the peaceful Altarian Republic stood up, tears streaming down her face. For 300 years, my people lived in fear of hegemony expansion. Today, we are truly free for the first time since our grandparents were born. Similar declarations came from dozens of other species. The hegemony had ruled through fear for so long that many civilizations had forgotten what peace felt like. But it was Fleet Admiral Park's final statement that would be remembered throughout galactic history. Let every species in this chamber understand, humanity will not conquer you, enslave you, or demand tribute from you. But neither will we allow others to do these things. The era of conquest is over. The era of protection has begun. As the formal session ended, delegates from across the galaxy approached the human representatives. Some wanted to negotiate trade, agreements, others sought defensive pacts, and many simply wanted to thank humanity for ending the hegemony's reign of terror. Vextar struggled to his feet and slowly approached Fleet Admiral Park. The once mighty council member looked broken and old, his scales dull and his movements painful. Admiral, he whispered, his voice barely audible. Why? Why show mercy to those who would have destroyed you? Fleet Admiral Park looked at the defeated reptilian with something that might have been pity. Because someone has to break the cycle. Vextar. For too long, this galaxy has operated on the principle that might makes right. Humanity chooses to believe that right makes might. Years later, historians would mark this day as the beginning of a new age in galactic civilization. The hegemony, humbled and reformed, became one of humanity's most reliable allies. Species that had lived in fear for centuries began to explore, trade, and build peaceful relationships. And in the depths of space, the Ghost Fleet continued its silent watch, ensuring that no species would ever again face the choice between submission and extinction. The galaxy had learned to fear humanity not for their aggression, but for their mercy, and the terrifying competence they showed when that mercy was rejected. The age of conquest was over. The age of humanity had begun.